Hi class, this is your instructor, Skylar Huff, and this is the 56th chapter. This is Ecology and Geography of Life. Earth has many environments. Natural selection affects an organism's ability to survive and reproduce in a given environment. In natural selection, both the abiotic and biotic factors eliminate the least fit individuals in a population. Over time, succeeding generations of organisms that live in each biome or major aquatic ecosystem become better adapted to local environmental conditions. Black-tailed prairie dogs are superbly adapted to the biotic and abiotic factors of their environment. Their teeth and digestive tracts are modified to eat and easily digest the seeds and leaves of grasses that are growing in great profusion on the Great Plains of western North America. Prairie dogs live in large colonies of about 500 individuals. The eyes of every individual in the colony watch for potential danger, and when they see it, prairie dogs call out to warn the rest of the colony. When danger approaches, each prairie dog dives into its underground home. Each burrow has at least 2 openings and consists of an elaborate network of long tunnels with several chambers: a nursery for the young, a sleeping chamber, a toilet chamber, and a listening chamber close to the entrance. Piles of excavated soil around the burrows, entrances, and help prevent flooding during storms. To survive winter, black-tailed prairie dogs sleep in their burrows. Their metabolism slows and they subsist on stored fat in their bodies. They do not truly hibernate, however, and may leave their burrows to look for food when weather warms. Like prairie dogs, each species has a structural, behavior, and physiological adaptations for its own particular environment. As you examine Earth's major terrestrial and aquatic ecosystems, including the species characteristics of each, think about the variety of adaptations that natural selection has produced in organisms in response to their particular environments. So let us now begin with biomes. So a biome is a large, relatively distinct terrestrial region that has similar climate, soil, plants, and animals, regardless of where it occurs. So because it covers a large geographic area, a biome encompasses many interacting landscapes. So a landscape is a large land area composed of interacting ecosystems. And many times, of course, these are going to be in several square kilometers. So huge swaths of land. So biomes largely correspond to major climate zones, with temperature and precipitation being most important. And keep in mind what you all see here to the left, and I'll get back to this in just a moment. So near the poles, temperature is generally the overriding climate factor. In tropical and temperate regions, precipitation becomes more significant than temperature. And of course, there are other biotic factors to which biomes are sensitive to, including temperature extremes, rapid temperature changes, flood, droughts, strong winds, and fires. So as we continue through those 9 major biomes here, they are, of course, the tundra, the boreal forest, the temperate rainforest, temperate deciduous forest, temperate grassland, the chaparral, desert, savanna, and tropical rainforest. So as we discuss each biome as a distinct entity, biomes integrate into, of course, one another at their boundaries. So back to where I was here, class, and of course this is in your textbook found on page 1217. So this gives you all that distribution of the world's biomes, of course, and as they are distributed, it's largely in part, class, determined by the climate patterns, and of course, an area's water measured in precipitation, and energy measured as temperature. So as you see this, class, which is known as figure 56.1, this, class, is known as a Whittaker diagram. And this came about, of course, and was adapted from Whittaker, 1975. So with this given class the average annual temperature and the average annual precipitation in centimeters, you can, of course, predict in which biome that, of course, it is. So just keep in mind, class, that on your test, you'll be given questions based upon this diagram. And it should not be, class, much of a challenge at all to, of course, answer those questions given this figure. Let's now continue on, class, to the tundra, the cold, boggy plains of the far north. So it occurs, or the Arctic tundra as it's sometimes called, in the extreme northern latitudes wherever snow melts seasonally. So in the southern hemisphere, it's the Antarctic tundra, and is located, of course, on the Antarctic Peninsula and nearby islands. So animals that live here, class, of course, are things such as the elephant, seals, and penguins. So plant life in this warmer, slightly moisture region of Antarctica consists mainly of mosses and lichens, and some liverworts and fungi, but only 2 species of vascular plants. So a third similar ecosystem located in the higher elevations of the mountains, called the alpine tundra. And then let's continue on, of course. So the Arctic tundra has typically long, harsh winters and extremely short summers. So although the growing season, with its warmer temperatures, is as short as 50 days, the days are long, and then above the Arctic Circle, the sun does not set at all for many days in midsummer. However, the amount of light at midnight is only about a tenth of that at noon. So the precipitation, of course, is little, and it's, of course, little precipitation over much of the tundra, and most of it falls during the summer months. So the tundra soils tend to be geologically young because most was formed after that last ice age, and the soils are usually nutrient poor and have little organic litter in the uppermost layer of the soil. So although the soil surface melts during the summer, the tundra does have a layer of permanently frozen ground called permafrost that varies in depth and thickness. So because the permafrost interferes with drainage, the thawed upper zone of the soil is usually waterlogged during the summer. So limited precipitation combined with low temperatures and flat topography and permafrost produces a landscape of broad, shallow lakes, sluggish streams, and bogs. So many scientists are concerned that global warming is accelerating the melting of permafrost, resulting in rapidly increasing carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere. So year-round animal life of the tundra includes weasels, Arctic foxes, gray wolves, snowshoe hares, ptarmigan, snowy owls, musk oxen, and lemmings, not to mention voles. So the tundra regenerates quite slowly after it's been disturbed, and even casual recreation causes damage and pollution. Up next, class, we have what is known as, well, I forgot to mention the caribou. The caribou, which of course migrate, and of course there's a video of which you can see the caribou. So now we'll get, class, to what is known as the boreal forest. The boreal forest, class, also known as the taiga, is just south of the tundra. And of course, conifers, the cone-bearing trees, of course, they are the species that predominates as forest plants. So it stretches across both North America and Eurasia, and is the world's largest terrestrial biome, covering as much as 10% of Earth's land. So a biome comparable to the boreal forest is not found in the southern hemisphere because it has no land at the corresponding latitudes. Winters here are extremely cold and severe, although not as harsh as in the tundra. The boreal forest receives little precipitation, and its soil is typically acidic, low in minerals, and has a deep layer of partly decomposed conifer needles at the surface. The boreal forest contains numerous ponds and lakes in the water-filled depressions dug by grinding ice sheets during the last ice age. So white and black spruces, the balsam fir, the eastern larch, and other conifers dominate the boreal forest. However, deciduous trees such as the aspen or birch, which shed their leaves in autumn, form striking stands. Conifers have many drought-resistant adaptations, such as those needle-like leaves with a minimal surface area to reduce water loss. Such an adaptation enables conifers to withstand the drought of the northern winter months. So when roots do not absorb water because the ground is frozen. So natural selection also favors the conifers in the boreal forest because being evergreen, they resume photosynthesis as soon as warmer temperatures return. The animal life here class includes larger animal species, such as the caribou, which of course migrate from the tundra to the boreal forest for winter, bears, moose, and even wolves. However, most animal life is medium to small, and it includes rodents and rabbits, and even fur-bearing predators such as the lynx and the mink. Most species of birds are seasonally abundant but migrate to warmer climates for winter, and insects are numerous, but there are few amphibians and reptiles except in the extreme southern boreal forest. So most of the boreal forest is not suitable for agriculture because of its short growing season and mineral poor soil. And do keep in mind that the boreal forest, which is harvested primarily by clear cutting, is currently the primary source for the world's industrial wood and wood fiber. This is the boreal forest, also known as the taiga. The temperate rainforest has cool weather, dense fog, and high precipitation. So the coniferous temperate rainforest grows on the northwestern coast of North America. So similar vegetation exists in southeastern Australia and in southwestern South America. The annual precipitation of this biome is high and as high as 150 inches. The condensation of water from dense coastal fog augments the annual precipitation. So the proximity of the temperate rainforest to the coastline areas moderates the temperature so that the seasonal fluctuation is narrow. Winters here are mild and the summers are cool. The temperate rainforest has a relatively nutrient-poor soil, although its organic content may be high. There are cool temperatures which slow the activity of bacterial and fungal decomposers. Thus, needles of fallen large branches and trunks accumulate on the ground as litter. It takes many years for the litter to decay and release the inorganic minerals to the soil. The dominant vegetation found here in the North American temperate rainforest is large evergreen trees, such as the western hemlock, the Douglas fir, the western red cedar, and the Sitka spruce. Temperate rainforest is rich in epiphytic vegetation, which consists of smaller plants that grow non-parasitically on the trunks and branches of large trees. Epiphytes in this biome are mainly the mosses, lichens, and ferns, and all of which also carpet the ground. So there are squirrels, wood rats, mule deer, elk, and numerous bird species. So several species of reptiles are found here, such as the painted turtles and the western terrestrial garter snakes. Amphibians here, such as the giant Pacific giant salamanders and Pacific tree frogs, are common here. The temperate rainforest is one of the richest wood producers in the world, and it supplies us with lumber and pulpwood. It is also one of the most complex ecosystems in terms of species richness. So care must be taken to avoid over-harvesting of the original old-growth forests, which of course such an ecosystem takes hundreds of years to develop. So when the logging industry harvests old forests, it typically replants the area with monoculture trees that it harvests then in 40 to 100-year cycles. Thus, the old growth forest ecosystem, once harvested, never has a chance to redevelop. So only less than about 10% of the old growth temperate rainforest in Washington, Oregon, and Northern California remains untouched. These temperate forest ecosystems provides the biological habitat for many organisms, including more than 50 endangered or threatened species. Next up is the temperate deciduous forest. It has a canopy of broad leaf trees. So seasonality and hot summers, meaning with cold winters, is characteristic of the temperate deciduous forest. It occurs in the temperate areas where precipitation ranges from about 30 to 50 inches annually. And typically, the soil of the temperate deciduous forests consists of both a topsoil rich in organic material and a deep clay-rich lower layer. As organic materials decay, mineral ions are released. If roots of living trees do not absorb these ions, they leach into the clay where they may be retained. Broadleaf hardwood trees such as the oak, hickory, maple, and beech, which lose their foliage annually, dominate the temperate deciduous forests of the northeastern and mid-Atlantic United States and much of Central Europe. The trees of the temperate deciduous forests form a dense canopy that overlies saplings and shrubs. Temperate deciduous forests in North America originally contained a variety of large mammals such as mountain lions, bison, wolves, and other species now regionally extinct, plus deer, bear, and many small mammals and birds such as wild turkeys, scarlet tangers, and blue jays. Both reptiles and amphibians abounded together with a denser, more varied insect life than exists today. In Europe and North America, logging and land clearing for farms, tree plantations, and cities have removed much of the original temperate deciduous forest. Where it has regenerated, temperate deciduous forests is often in a semi-natural state, highly modified by humans for recreation, livestock foraging, timber harvest, and other uses. Although these returning forests do not have the biological diversity of virgin stands, many forest organisms have successfully become reestablished. For example, in the eastern United States, white-tailed deer populations were decimated by hunting by 1900, as large parts of forests were modified for agriculture use, and large predators, being wolves and panthers, were eliminated. The white-tailed deer population rebounded, and in fact, many regions now consider the animals an agricultural or suburban nuisance and have increasingly invested in research to monitor and manage the deer population. Worldwide, the temperate deciduous forest was among the first biomes to be converted to agricultural use. Next up, class, are the temperate grasslands. So they occur in areas with moderate precipitation. Here, summers are hot, winters are cold, and fires help shape the landscape. So rainfall is often uncertain here in the temperate grassland. Annual precipitation, class, is in about 10 to 30 inches. In grasslands with less precipitation, minerals tend to accumulate in a marked layer just below the topsoil. These minerals tend to leach out of the soil in areas with more precipitation. The grassland soil contains considerable organic material because surface parts of many grasses die off each winter and contribute to the organic content of the soil. Many grasses are sod formers in that their roots and rhizomes form a thick, continuous underground mat. Moist temperate grasslands are known as tallgrass prairies, and they occur in the United States in Iowa, western Minnesota, eastern Nebraska, and parts of the Midwestern states, and across Canada's prairie provinces. Although few trees grow except near rivers and streams, grasses, some as tall as about 6.5 feet, grow in great profusion in the deep, rich soil. Before most of this area was converted to arable land, it was covered with herds of grazing animals, particularly bison. The principal predators were wolves, although in sparser, drier areas, coyotes took their place. Smaller fauna included prairie dogs and their predators, western meadowlarks, reptiles, and a great number of insects. Short grass prairies, in which the dominant grasses are less than about 1.5 foot tall, and are temperate grasslands that receive less precipitation than the moister grasslands just described, but more precipitation than deserts. Here in the United States, the shortgrass prairies occur in the eastern half of Montana, the western half of South Dakota, and parts of other Midwestern states. They also appear in western Alberta in Canada. The plants grow in less abundance than in the moister grasslands, and occasionally some bare soil is exposed. In North America, grassland, particularly tall grass prairie, was once well suited to agriculture that little of it remains. More than 90% has vanished under the plow, and the remainder is so fragmented that almost nowhere can we see even an approximation of what the European settlers saw when they settled the Midwest. Today, the tallgrass prairie is considered North America's rarest biome. The chaparral. It's a thicket of evergreen shrubs and small trees. Some hilly temperate environments have mild winters with abundant rainfall combined with extremely dry summers. Such Mediterranean climates, as they are called, occur not only in the area around the Mediterranean Sea, but also in California, Western Australia, parts of Chile, and South Africa. And so in California, this environment is called the chaparral. This vegetation type is also known as mackay in the Mediterranean region, Mallee scrub in Australia, and motorali in Chile, and Cape scrub in Africa. Chaparral soil is thin and infertile. Frequent fires occur naturally in this environment, particularly in late summer and autumn. Chaparral vegetation looks strikingly similar in different areas of the world, even though the individual species are quite different. A dense growth of evergreen shrubs, often drought-resistant pine or scrub oak trees, dominates the chaparral. During the rainy winter season, the landscape may be lush and green, but during the hot, dry summer, the plants lie dormant. Trees and shrubs often have many small, hard, leathery leaves that resist water loss. Many plants are also fire adapted and grow best in the months following a fire. Such growth is possible in the months following a fire, and such growth is possible because fire releases minerals that were tied up in the plants that were burned. With the newly availability of essential minerals, plants sprout vigorously during winter rains. Mule deer, wood rats, brush rabbits, skinks, and other lizards, and many other species of birds are common animals of the chaparral. Fires, which occur at irregular intervals in California, chaparral vegetation, often consume expensive homes built on the hilly chaparral landscape. Unfortunately, efforts to control naturally occurring fires sometimes backfire. Denser, thicker vegetation tends to accumulate when periodic fires are prevented, also known as during fire suppression. Then, when fire does occur, it is much, much more severe. Also, more frequent fires due to human activity are driving ecosystem changes. As those ecosystem changes occur, in which those sensitive native species are then being displaced by non-native weeds. The highly flammable weeds contribute to more severe fires class, reducing biodiversity and converting the chaparral to a weedy wasteland. Removing the chaparral vegetation, whose roots hold the soil in place, also causes problems such as mudslides that occur during winter rains in these areas. Deserts. So the desert is an arid ecosystem. Deserts are dry areas found in temperate, which are cold deserts, and subtropical or tropical regions called warm deserts. North America has four distinct deserts. The Great Basin Desert in Nevada, Utah, and neighboring states is a cold desert dominated by sagebrush. The Mojave Desert in Nevada and California is a warm desert known for its Joshua trees. The Chihuahuan Desert is home to century plants called agaves. And it's a warm desert found in Texas, New Mexico, and Mexico. And then the warm Sonoran Desert, with its many species of cacti, is found in Arizona, California, and Mexico. The low water vapor content of the desert atmosphere leads to a leads to daily temperature extremes of heat and cold. So a major change in daily temperature occurs in each 24-hour period. Deserts vary greatly depending on the amount of precipitation they receive, which is generally less than 10 inches per year. A few deserts are so dry that virtually no plant life occurs in them. A few deserts are, as a result of sparse vegetation, desert soil is low in organic material, but often high in mineral content. Desert vegetation includes both perennials, being the cacti, the yuccas, the Joshua trees, and sagebrushes, and after a rain, flowering annuals. Desert plants tend to have reduced leaves or no leaves, an adaptation that conserves water, and in cacti, such as the giant saguaro, for example, the stem carries out photosynthesis and also expands, accordion style, to store water. The leaves are modified into spines, which discourage herbivores, and other desert plants shed their leaves for most of the year, growing only during the brief moist season. Desert animals tend to be small, and during the heat of the day, they remain undercover or return to shelter periodically, whereas at night they come out to forage or hunt. In addition to the desert adapted insects, there are many specialized desert reptiles, such as the iguanas, desert tortoises, and rattlesnakes, and a few desert adapted amphibians. Mammals include rodents such as the American kangaroo rat, which does not tend to drink water but subsists solely on the water content of its food, primarily seeds and insects. American deserts are also home to jackrabbits, and kangaroos live in South Australian deserts. Carnivores such as the African fennec fox and some birds of prey, especially owls, live on rodents and rabbits. So during the driest months of the year, many desert insects, amphibians, and reptiles and mammals turn underground, where they remain inactive. This period of dormancy is called estivation. Humans have altered North American deserts in several ways, particularly off-road vehicles, which damage the desert vegetation, which sometimes take years to recover. When the top layer of soil is disturbed, erosion occurs more readily than the soil is undamaged, and less vegetation grows to support the native animals. Another problem is that certain cacti and desert tortoises have become rare as a result of poaching. Houses, factories, and farms built in desert areas require vast quantities of water, which must be imported from distant areas. Irrigation of desert soils often causes them to become salty and unfit for crops or native vegetation. Aquifer depletion in the United States deserts is particularly of critical, and in central and southern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico is increasing concern in Southern California, Nevada, and Utah. Because, of course, by doing such a thing, class, it causes, of course, underground water levels to drop greatly. Now on to the savanna, a tropical grassland with scattered trees. The savanna biome is a tropical grassland with widely scattered clumps of low trees. It is found in areas of relatively low or seasonal rainfall with prolonged dry periods. Temperatures in the savanna vary little throughout the year, and precipitation, not temperature, regulates the seasons. Annual precipitation is about 60 inches a year. Savanna soil is low in essential minerals, in part because it's strongly leached. Savanna soil is often rich in aluminum, which resists leaching, and in places the aluminum reaches levels that are toxic to many plants. Although the African savanna is best known, savanna also occurs in South America and northern Australia. Wide expanses of grasses, interrupted by occasional trees, characterize the savanna. Trees such as the acacia bristle with thorns that provide protection against herbivores. Both trees and grasses have fire-adapted features, such as extensive underground roots. that enable it to survive the seasonal droughts, as well as periodic fires that sweep through the savanna. The world's greatest assemblage of hoofed animals occurs in the African savanna. Here live great herds of herbivores, including wildebeests, antelopes, giraffes, zebras, and elephants. Large predators such as lions and hyenas kill and scavenge the herds. In areas of seasonal varying rainfall, the herds and their predators migrate annually. Savanna is rapidly being fragmented and converted to rangeland for cattle and other domesticated animals, which are replacing the big herds of wild animals. The problem is particularly acute in Africa, which has the most rapidly growing human population of any continent. In some places, severe overgrazing by domestic animals has contributed to the conversion of marginal savanna into desert, a process known as desertification. And I'll say again, known as desertification. In desertification, yes, I said desertification, the reduced grass cover caused by overgrazing allows wind and water to erode the soil. Erosion removes the topsoil and decreases the soil's ability to support crops or livestock. Desertification has also become a serious problem in South America, Mexico, and the Caribbean due to overgrazing, farming, and drought. Satellite monitoring, in concert with local level management, has shown promising results to reclaim fringe areas. Now to the two basic types. So first will be the tropical forests, and there are two types. We'll begin with the tropical dry forest. There are many kinds of tropical forests, but ecologists generally classify them as being one of the two types, the tropical dry forest or the tropical rainforest. Tropical dry forests occur in regions with a wet season and a dry season, usually 2 to 3 months a year. Here, the annual precipitation is about 80 inches. During the dry season, many tropical trees shed their leaves and remain dormant. Much of the temperate trees do during wintertime. India, Brazil, Thailand, and Mexico are some of the countries that have tropical dry forests. The tropical dry forests integrate with savanna on their dry edges and with tropical rainforests on their wet edges. Logging and overgrazing by domestic animals have fragmented and degraded many tropical dry forests. The annual precipitation of tropical rainforests is about 180 inches. Much of this precipitation, which occurs almost daily, comes from locally recycled water that enters the atmosphere by transpiration from the forest's own trees. Tropical rainforests are often located in areas with ancient, highly weathered, mineral-poor soil. Little organic matter accumulates in such soils. Because the temperatures are high and the soil moisture is abundant year-round, decay organisms and detritus-feeding ants and termites decompose litter quite rapidly. Vast networks of roots and mycorrhizae quickly absorb the minerals from decomposing materials. Thus, minerals of tropical rainforests are tied up in the vegetation rather than in the soil. Tropical rainforests are found in Central and South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. A tropical rainforest is very productive despite the scarcity of nutrients and minerals in the soil. Its plants, stimulated by the abundant solar energy and precipitation, capture considerable energy by photosynthesis. Of all the biomes class, the tropical rainforest is unrivaled in species richness. Most trees of the tropical rainforest are evergreen flowering plants. A fully developed rainforest has several distinct stories or strata of vegetation. The topmost story, called the emergent layer, consists of the crowns of the oldest, tallest trees, as tall as 130 feet or more in height. These trees are exposed directly to sunlight and are subject to the warmest temperatures, lowest humidities, and the strongest winds. Next is the canopy. It reaches a height of about 115 feet. The canopy allows little sunlight for the support of the sparse understory called the shrub layer and ground layer. These layers all consist of smaller plants specialized for life in the shade, as well as the seedlings of taller trees. The vegetation of tropical rainforests is generally not dense at the ground level, except near stream banks where the fallen trees has opened the canopy. Tropical rainforests support extensive epiphytic communities of smaller plants such as orchids and bromeliads. So, although epiphytes grow in the crotches of branches or on bark, or even in the leaves of their hosts, most use their host trees only for the physical support, not for nourishment. So, again, class, an epiphyte is a tree that grows, class, on, or at least a plant that grows on another plant. Because little light penetrates to the understory, many plants living there are adapted to climb already established host trees. Once in the canopy, those trees grow from the upper branches of one tree to another, connecting the tops of the trees and providing a walkway for many of the canopy's residents. Not counting bacteria or other soil-dwelling organisms, about 90% of the tropical rainforest organisms live in the middle and upper canopies. Rainforest animals includes abundant and varied insect, reptile, and amphibian fauna on Earth. And I say again, the most abundant and varied insect, reptile, and amphibian fauna on Earth. Birds too are diverse, with some specialized to consume fruits, some, of course, to consume nectar, and others to consume insects. Most rainforest mammals, such as sloths and monkeys, live only in trees and never climb down to the ground. Some large dwelling mammals, such as elephants, are also found in tropical rainforests. So, unless strong conservation measures are soon initiated, the human population growth and agriculture and industrial expansion into the tropical countries may spell the end of tropical rainforests by the early 22nd century. Many rainforest species may become extinct before they're even identified and scientifically described. There is the, of course, strata of the tropical rainforests. So just bear in mind that on your test, you will be asked questions that deal with those characteristics, class, of these major biomes. Aquatic ecosystems. The term biome is used to describe those terrestrial environments based on dominant forms of animals, climate, vegetation, and does not adequately describe the aquatic environments. Aquatic ecologists do not distinguish aquatic ecosystems based on the dominant form of vegetation. Instead, they use primarily abiotic factors such as the salinity to determine aquatic life boundaries. Salinity is the concentration of dissolved salts in a body of water, and it affects the kind of organisms present in aquatic ecosystems, as does the amount of dissolved oxygen. Because water greatly interferes with the penetration of light, floating aquatic organisms that photosynthesize remain near the water's surface, and the vegetation attached to the bottom grows only in shallow water. In addition, low levels of essential minerals often limit the number and distribution of organisms in certain aquatic environments. Other abiotic determinants of species composition in aquatic ecosystems includes water depth, temperature, pH, and the presence or absence of waves and currents. So aquatic ecosystems, both fresh and marine, contain three main ecological categories of organisms. So they are free-floating plankton, strongly swimming nekton, and the bottom-dwelling benthos. Plankton includes those small or microscopic organisms that are relatively free feeble swimmers. For the most part, they are carried about at the mercy of currents or waves. They are unable to swim far horizontally, but some species are capable of large vertical migrations and are found at different depths of water at different times of the day or at different seasons. Plankton are generally subdivided class into two major categories, either phytoplankton or zooplankton. Phytoplankton class includes the free-floating algae and the photosynthetic cyanobacteria, and they are producers that form the base of most aquatic food webs. Zooplankton are non-photosynthetic organisms that include the protozoa, the tiny crustaceans, and even the larval stages of many animals. Nekton, however, are larger, actively swimming organisms such as fishes, whales, and turtles. Finally, benthos, the bottom-dwelling organisms. They fix themselves to one spot, such as the sponges, the oysters, and barnacles. So they burrow into the sand, including many worms and echinoderms, or just walk or swim about on the bottom, including the brittle stars, aquatic insect larvae, or even crayfish. Let's begin now with freshwater ecosystems. So freshwater ecosystems, they include streams and rivers, which are flowing water systems, and even ponds and lakes, the standing water ecosystems, and marshes and swamps, which are freshwater wetlands. Each type of freshwater ecosystem has its own abiotic conditions and characteristic organisms. Although the freshwater ecosystems occupy a relatively small portion, about meaning 2% of the Earth's surface, they are important to the hydrologic cycle because they assist in recycling the precipitation that flows as a surface runoff to the ocean. So freshwater habitats also provide the homes for many species. So let's now begin with flowing water ecosystems, the streams and rivers. So the nature of flowing water ecosystem changes greatly from its source, where it begins, to its mouth, where it empties into another body of water. Headwater streams are usually shallow, clear, cold, and swiftly flowing, and highly oxygenated. In contrast, rivers, which are downstream from the headwaters, are typically wider, deeper, turbid, and not as cold, slower flowing, and less oxygenated than headwater streams. The surrounding forests may shade parts of the stream or river, whereas other parts may be exposed to direct sunlight. Along parts of a stream or river, groundwater wells up through the sediments on the bottom. So this local input of water moderates the temperature so that the summer temperatures are cooler and winter temperatures are warmer than adjacent parts of the flowing water ecosystem. So streams and rivers depend on land for much of the energy. So in headwater streams, up to 99% of the energy input comes from the detritus, which of course is dead organic material such as leaves, carried from the land into the streams and rivers by wind or surface runoff. Downstream, however, rivers contain more producers and therefore depend slightly less on detritus as a source of energy than do headwaters. Human activities have several adverse effects on rivers and streams, including water pollution and the impacts of dams built to contain the water of rivers or streams. So pollution such as sewage and fertilizer runoff alters the physical environment of the floor-watering ecosystem and changes the biotic component downstream from the pollution source. So dams change the nature of flowing water ecosystems, both upstream and downstream from the dam location. A dam causes water to break up, resulting in flooding of large areas of land and formation of a reservoir, which destroys terrestrial habitat. Below the dam, however, the once powerful river is reduced to a relative trickle, so the flowing water ecosystem is altered. Now to standing water ecosystems, and you all can see where we're going now. So to contrast moving water systems, such as rivers, ponds, and lakes, are characterized by zonation. So a large lake has four basic zones littoral zone, the limnetic zone, the profundo, and benthic. So the littoral zone is shallow water along the shore of that lake or pond. It includes rooted emergent vegetation such as cattails or burr reeds, plus several deeper dwelling aquatic plants and algae. It is the most productive zone of the lake, and photosynthesis is greatest in the littoral zone because light is abundant and because the littoral zone receives nutrient input from the surrounding land that stimulates the growth of plants and algae. Additionally, ponds and lakes, like rivers and streams, you all, depend on the detritus carried from the land for much of their energy. Animals here include tadpoles, turtles, worms, crayfish, and other crustaceans, including insect larvae, many fishes such as the perch, carp, and bass. The limnetic zone is open water away from, of course, the littoral, away from the shore. It extends down as far as sunlight penetrates to permit photosynthesis. The main organisms here are the microscopic phytoplankton and zooplankton. Larger fishes spend some of their time in the limnetic zone, although they may visit the littoral zone to feed and reproduce. Because of the depth of this zone, less vegetation grows here. Beneath the limnetic zone is the profundo zone. Because light does not penetrate effectively to this depth, plants and algae do not live in this zone. Food drifts into the profundo zone from the littoral and limnetic zones. Bacteria and archaea decompose dead plants and animals that reach the profundo, thus liberating minerals. So the profundo zone tends to be both mineral rich and anaerobic, meaning oxygen deficient, with few organisms other than the anaerobic bacteria and archaea occupying it. The benthic zone is the bottom layer of the lake, so decomposers, detritus feeders, and some fish do live here. Let's get now to, of course, a photo showing you examples of the animals that live in these differing zones. Now on to thermal stratification in temperate lakes. So with thermal stratification, it's, of course, the temperature changes that sharply occur with depth. So thermal stratification occurs because the summer sunlight penetrates and warms the surface water, making it less dense. And in summer, cool water remains at the lake bottom and is separated from the warm water. So the water above, by that abrupt temperature transition called the thermocline, shown there. So the seasonal distribution of temperature and oxygen affects the distribution of fish in the lake. In temperate lakes, falling temperatures of autumn class causes a mixing of the lake waters called fall turnover. As the water cools, its density increases and it sinks, displacing the less dense, warmer, rich mineral water beneath. Warmer water then rises to the surface and in turn cools and sinks, and this process of cooling and sinking continues until the lake reaches its uniform temperature throughout. So, of course, in winter, the surface water cools, and in the event that there's ice, it forms as less dense than cold water. Thus, ice forms on the surface of the water. So, as that occurs, in spring, a spring turnover occurs because the ice melt, and the surface water again sinks to the bottom, and of course, the water returns to the surface, and summer rise. Thermal stratification once occurs again. So, with increased nutrient and algae growth, the presence of high levels of plant and algae nutrients, such as nitrogen and phosphorus, causes enrichment in the fertilization of the body of water. So, excess amounts of these nutrients enter the waterways from sewage and from fertilizer runoff from lawns and fields. The water is an enriched pond or lake is clouded because of the vast number of algae and cyanobacteria, causing, of course, an algal bloom. So with this, the species composition is different in an enriched lake. And this class could, of course, cause an issue. So enrichment is reversible and has declined in North America since the 1970s because legislation limits the phosphate content of detergents and because better sewage treatment plants have been constructed. So agriculture is the leading source of water quality impairment of the United States surface water today. Major causes of enrichment problems in waterways include fertilizer runoff, animal wastes, and sewage plant residues. So states and communities continue to improve stormwater management practices and have passed laws to ban phosphate fertilizers. All right. Next up, we're at wetlands. So freshwater ecosystems. We have the freshwater wetlands at the transition between aquatic and terrestrial environments. So these wetlands, which are usually covered by shallow water for each part of the year, which is the definition of a wetland class, are usually characteristic of soil and water tolerant vegetation. They include marshes, which are dominated by grass-like plants, and swamps, which are dominated by woody trees and or shrubs. Freshwater wetlands also include hardwood bottomland forests, which are the lowlands along streams and rivers that are periodically flooded. It includes also the prairie potholes, which are the small, shallow ponds that form when glacial ice melted at the end of the last ice age, and even peat moss bogs. So wetlands are valued as wildlife habitat for migratory waterfowl, ducks, you all, and many other bird species, and even, of course, those geese that you may have seen. And then, of course, there are beavers, otters, muskrats, and other game fishes. A huge variety of microorganisms, fungi, plants, and invertebrates are also members of these ecosystems. So wetlands are holding areas for excess water when rivers flood their banks, and also for nutrient-rich runoff from the surrounding land. The floodwater stored in the wetlands then drains slowly back into rivers, providing a steady flow of water throughout the year. Wetlands also serve as groundwater recharging areas. So one of their most important roles is to trap and hold pollutants in the flooded soil, thereby cleansing and purifying the water. Such important environmental functions as these are known as ecosystem services. Wetlands, which are here class, are some of the most amazing places on Earth, and there should never be a reason class to destroy or even change a wetland. On to estuarine environments, the coastal ecosystems. So where the ocean meets the land, there may be one of several kinds of ecosystems: a rocky shore, a sandy beach, an intertidal mudflat, or even a tidal estuary. An estuary, by definition, is a coastal body of water partly surrounded by land with access to the open ocean and a large supply of fresh water from rivers. Water levels in an estuary rise and fall with the tides, and salinity fluctuates with tidal cycles, the time of the year, and precipitation. Salinity also, excuse me, you all, salinity also changes gradually within the estuary from fresh water at the river entrance to salty water at the ocean water mouth of the estuary. Because estuaries undergo marked daily, seasonal, and annual variations in temperature, salinity, and other physical properties of estuaries, estuary organisms also have a wide tolerance to such changes. So estuaries are among the most fertile ecosystems in the world, often having much greater productivities than the adjacent ocean or freshwater river. This high productivity is a result of four factors. The action of tides promotes rapid circulation of nutrients and helps to remove waste products to increase oxygenation, increase oxygenation. Minerals transported from the land into streams and rivers, empty into the estuary, provides nutrients. The high level of light that penetrates the shallow water supports photosynthesis. And the presence of many plants provides an extensive photosynthetic carpet and also mechanically traps detritus, forming a basis of detritus food webs. Most commercially important fishes and shellfish spend their larval stages in estuaries among the protective and tangled of decaying stems. The salt marsh is a temperate estuary. This, of course, the shallow wetlands in which we have salt-tolerant grasses that dominate. Uninformed people have often considered salt marshes as worthless, empty stretches of land. As a result, people have used them as dumps, severely polluting them, or filled them with dredged bottom materials to form artificial land for residential and industrial development. A large part of the estuarine environment is lost in this way, along with many ecosystem services such as the biological habitats, sediment and pollution trapping, groundwater supply, and storm buffering. Because, of course, the salt marshes are what would absorb much energy of a storm, i.e., a hurricane class, a storm surge, and thereby prevent a flood damage elsewhere. Mangrove forests are the tropical equivalent of salt marshes, and they cover about 70% of the tropical and subtropical mudflats where tides and waves fluctuate. Well, alright, so marine ecosystems dominate Earth's surface, and I'll be here briefly, class. There is the intertidal, the benthic, and pelagic environment. So the pelagic environment is divided into two, the Neritic Province and the Oceanic Province. So here, class, you see the differences in zonation. So of course, photosynthesis occurs here, and this is depth in meters. So yes, even at 200 meters, class, photosynthesis is occurring. Then there's twilight, and then there is darkness. That abysmal zone. So to not spend quite as much time as I spent prior to now, the intertidal zone is quite productive, class, between the low and high tides, with high levels of oxygen and light. So we have shifting sandy shores, and most animals have no notable adaptations to survive here. And with rocky shores, the animals are adapted to wave action and drying and temperature. At the benthic environment, we have sediments of the ocean floor, in which many marine animals inhabit, such as worms and clams, which burrow. So the benthic environment is divided into zones based on distance from land and light availability, including depth. So the abysmal zone extends from a depth of about 4,000 to 6,000 meters, class, and that is so deep. And the tidal zone is deeper than 6,000 meters. So in the benthic communities, class, seagrasses dominate here. And of course, they live in the shallow water at depths up to 10 meters. Kelps, class, the largest brown algae, are common in the cooler temperature waters of the marine environment. Corals live in the warm, shallow waters where light penetrates, and coral reefs are built from the accumulated calcium carbonate. They require, of course, light for photosynthetic zooxanthellae that live in their tissues. And yes, that's zooxanthellae. Coral reefs are most diverse of all marine environments, providing the habitat for hundreds or even thousands of species of fish and invertebrates. And of course, 27% of all of the world's coral reefs are at high risk from human activities. So the Neritic Province, class, is open ocean that overlies the continental shelves. So the shoreline to about 200 meters. The Oceanic Province covers the deep ocean basin, and it's the largest marine environment, containing about 75% of the ocean's water. And then, of course, the Oceanic Province, class, which, of course, we have the field of eaters, scavengers, or even predators. Many are invertebrates, such as the giant squid, and these fishes are strikingly adapted to the darkness and food scarcity. So here we go, class, with human activity again. Coastal development class has altered and even destroyed many coastal ecosystems. And with that, the mangrove forests, the salt marshes, the seagrass beds, and even coral reefs. So with this, the pollution class from land, rivers, and precipitation by way of the atmospheric pollution has been the cause, and even disease-causing bacteria and viruses from sewage class. So with this class, tons of trash, millions of tons of trash, end up in our marine ecosystems. Even class heavy metals, synthetic chemicals, pesticides, and fertilizers. Offshore mining and oil drilling class, and even shipping pollute the Neritic Province. So fishing dredges and trawls destroy entire communities with a single pass of our ocean floors. So with that class, they remove every single fish in that target area, dredging for shrimp. And most countries recognize the importance of ocean life to this planet, but few have the resources or programs to protect and manage the ocean effectively. So the ecotone class is that transition zone where two communities or biomes meet and integrate, and they're often classed quite high in species diversity, and that's good to know for your test. So lastly, class is biogeography, which, as I say, is one of the most interesting things you can learn about. So with this, biogeography class includes, as it is, the study class, and as it is studied, you bring them together, the geographic distribution of plants and animals, including their geographic patterns, and explain how those patterns arise. So with that, there is a geographic distribution of plants and animals, yes. And as it is, it's a number of patterns, and it's just the biogeographers, they recognize that the geologic and the climate changes, such as mountain building or even continental drift, and the periods of extensive glaciation influences the distribution of plants. So biogeography is linked to the evolutionary history and provides insight on how organisms may have interacted in their ancient ecosystems. So studying biogeography helps us to understand the continuum between the ancient and modern ecosystems. So with the geographic distributions class, each species, of course, has spread from its center of origin until it was halted by a barrier, be it unfavorable climate or by competition from other organisms. And the range of a particular species is that geographic area in which it's found. So an endemic species class is, of course, a species that's only found in one localized area, as opposed to a cosmopolitan species, which of course has a more worldwide distribution. And there are endemic species class to the state of Alabama. So having gotten this far, class, in our lecture, I'll say please make sure you all have prepared well. And if you have any questions, please ask. And this has been me, your instructor, class. And just keep in mind, class, those biogeographic realms that were, of course, put forth. I would say make sure you all do review those biogeographic realms. And you'll find those, class. They are, of course, 6, being those major barriers that separate each of those 6 biogeographic realms from others that help maintain the region's biological distinctness. The Paleoarctic from Eurasia, the Nearctic from, of course, North America, the Neotropical in South America, the Ethiopian in Africa, the Oriental in South Asia and Korea, and the Australian class in Australia. But I have been your instructor, Scholar Huff, and this has been, class, the 56th chapter. Prepare well, class, and study well.